Well, the British royals have posed for a new formal photograph. You notice there she's the only splash of color in this picture, but take a close look at her tiara.
4 minutes ago, the doors of the Royal Council chamber opened, and the British monarchy emerged, permanently changed. Camilla's title had been stripped from her by formal council order and transferred directly to Catherine. But the announcement was only the beginning. As the final words were read aloud, Camilla reached for the back of a chair, lost her balance, and collapsed before the people who had just removed the status she had fought decades to secure. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure you subscribe to Royal Zone so you don't miss a single update. Camilla did not move while the council secretary continued reading. Senior figures sat in silence after weeks of hidden tension. The Royal Council was the private body gathered to advise on the Crown's most serious internal decisions, and its order carried immediate force across the royal household. By removing her senior ceremonial title, the Council took away the privileges, precedents, and official duties attached to it. Those powers passed to Catherine at once. The Queen Consort kept her face controlled until the Princess of Wales was named. Then, something inside her seemed to break. Catherine was not simply receiving another duty. She was inheriting the place Camilla had spent decades defending against public anger, private doubt, and the fear that she would never be fully accepted. Charles watched his wife's expression change, yet the king remained completely silent. The final sentence struck hard. Camilla gripped the carved chair and whispered, "This cannot be final." Her knees gave way before anyone answered. Charles rose, but froze halfway toward her, trapped between instinct and authority. William moved first, calling for help as attendants lifted her from the floor. He looked toward his father and saw defeat written across that frozen chamber. Catherine knew nothing of the vote. She had been kept away from the chamber and had not been warned that the transfer would begin that day. The separation protected her from any suggestion that she had demanded Camilla's fall. Yet it meant she would receive the most explosive news of her royal life without any preparation. A sealed appendix remained beside the order. An appendix is an attached section containing extra binding terms, and this one restricted Camilla's staff, residences, briefings, and ceremonial authority. Only 3 people had read it. William glanced at the final page and noticed the space beneath Charles's name was empty. The king had not signed. Whether that meant resistance or protection became the most dangerous question in the entire palace. But to understand why one woman collapsed and another inherited her place, the palace first had to confront what each of them stood to lose. Camilla and Catherine had stood on the same balconies, attended the same ceremonies, and smiled beneath the same palace lights. Yet behind those carefully arranged appearances, they represented 2 completely different visions of the monarchy. One had spent years surviving rejection to reach the center of royal life. The other had earned public trust through patience and restraint. Now, in a single council vote, their carefully controlled relationship had been shattered beyond repair. Camilla had never viewed her royal position as something guaranteed. She had spent years facing public hostility, private suspicion, and the constant fear that the institution would tolerate her without ever fully accepting her. Every ceremony, every official duty, and every place beside Charles had carried deep emotional weight, because each one proved that she had survived. Losing the title, therefore, felt like more than a formal punishment. It felt like the palace had finally admitted that her place had always been temporary. Catherine had followed a very different path. The Princess of Wales, the title traditionally held by the wife of the future king, had built her influence slowly, through duty, family stability, and careful public discipline. She rarely challenged authority openly. Instead, she allowed trust to grow around her through consistency and restraint. William had watched that influence strengthen year after year, not through demands, but through the quiet partnership they had formed while preparing for the responsibilities ahead. Catherine lowered the council letter onto her lap and stared at the final paragraph. William stood close enough to see the shock in her face, but he did not interrupt. "I never asked to take anything from her," she said quietly. The prince answered that he knew. He also knew his wife understood the cruelty of receiving power at the exact moment another woman was collapsing beneath its loss. The future queen looked back at the document, struggling to separate duty from guilt. Camilla had spent decades trying to earn the recognition now being removed in one single morning. Catherine had spent those same years avoiding the appearance of ambition, yet the council had placed them on opposite sides of a decision neither could emotionally escape. William finally explained that the transfer was not intended as a reward. According to the formal account given to him during a private council briefing, it had been designed as a safeguard against a deeper constitutional and personal crisis. A constitutional crisis meant a threat to the rules, authority, and stability that allowed the monarchy to function. The issue had moved far beyond rivalry. Charles had once promised Camilla in a recorded private conversation that her position would remain protected. The king now faced an impossible choice between that promise and the institution he had sworn to defend. Catherine looked at her husband and asked what could have been serious enough to break his father's word. William paused before answering. The title had been removed in one morning, but the decision had truly begun weeks earlier during a ceremony that became the palace's point of no return. The council's decision did not begin with a legal document or a public scandal. It began in a crowded stateroom, beneath chandeliers and royal banners, when Camilla quietly overruled an instruction issued in Catherine's name. Most guests noticed nothing, but William saw the exchange. Anne heard the words that followed. And Charles watched his wife walk away from a warning that would later be remembered as the moment the monarchy's hidden power struggle became impossible to contain. Charles had been reducing selected public duties, and that change had forced the family to decide who would carry more ceremonial responsibility. Catherine had been given a larger role because her position beside the future king made her central to the monarchy's next chapter. Camilla still controlled several household channels, meaning the internal routes through which invitations, schedules, briefings, and formal instructions reached palace staff. That control gave her influence far beyond what the public could ever see. The tension finally broke during a Windsor investiture rehearsal. An investiture is a formal ceremony in which honors are presented on behalf of the crown. A written instruction approved by the king placed Catherine at the front of the official receiving line. Camilla read it, paused, and then ordered an aide to remove the princess's name and place her own above it. William saw the revised list before the rehearsal began. He followed the queen consort into a side corridor and asked with careful calm why his father's instruction had been changed. She did not apologize. Instead, Camilla looked directly at him and said Catherine needed to learn the difference between popularity and rank. The prince held his anger, but the words cut deeper than a dispute over positioning. They exposed the fear beneath the rivalry. Anne heard enough of the exchange to understand its meaning. Later, she found Charles alone and told him this was no longer a personal disagreement. According to a documented account prepared after the meeting, the Princess Royal warned that his wife had challenged the future structure of the crown itself. Catherine's role had been authorized by the sovereign. To erase it was to question his authority and William's future. A senior aide then placed 3 earlier directives before the king. Each had left his office with one instruction and reached staff carrying another. The pattern was completely undeniable. Camilla had not acted once in anger. She had repeatedly used her control of palace channels to reshape decisions after they had already been approved. Charles summoned her that evening. William waited outside, expecting an apology or surrender. Instead, voices rose, a door slammed, and the king emerged with a demand his son had never expected. The matter would now go before a formal council review. What began as a dispute over one ceremonial position was about to explode into the most painful confrontation of Charles's entire reign. There were no photographers, no advisors, and no carefully rehearsed statements when Charles finally faced Camilla. Only William and Anne remained in the room as witnesses. The king placed the altered directives on the table and asked one question: had she deliberately overruled him? Camilla did not deny it. Instead, she turned toward Catherine's husband and accused him of using his father's weakness to build a court of his own. What followed tore through every remaining illusion of family unity. Charles had chosen his private library because he still hoped to contain the damage. He wanted a family settlement before the full council took control. The altered directives lay between them as proof that approved royal instructions had been changed after leaving his office. Ceremonial authority meant the power to decide how official duties, positions, and appearances were arranged, and that authority flowed directly from the sovereign. Changing those orders in secret challenged both his trust and the command structure of the crown. Camilla turned toward William and said, Catherine's growing influence had not happened by accident. She accused him of building a separate circle around his wife and using the king's reduced workload to push the older generation aside. The prince held her gaze and answered that no one had forced her to alter his father's written instruction. Popularity was not the issue. Obedience was. The queen consort looked back at her husband, expecting him to defend her. Instead, Charles asked for an apology and demanded that she surrender control of the household channel, used to pass instructions to senior staff. The king's request was calm, but its meaning was brutal. Without that channel, she would lose the influence that had protected her place inside palace life. Camilla refused. She told him that giving in would leave her powerless inside her own marriage and completely exposed before everyone who had waited years to see her fall. Her voice tightened as she reminded him of promises made long before the crown rested on his head. Anne finally broke her silence. According to a documented account prepared after the confrontation, the Princess Royal revealed that she had already requested a formal review. Several senior staff members had admitted they feared retaliation if they questioned instructions coming from Camilla's office. The dispute had moved beyond family tension. People inside the institution no longer trusted the system. The chair scraped sharply as Camilla pushed herself backward. She looked directly at Charles and warned that allowing the review to continue would publicly destroy everything he had once promised to protect. Then she walked out and closed the door behind her. Charles remained completely still. After a long silence, he asked whether the council truly had the authority to remove her title without his willing approval. The answer would not come from affection or family loyalty. It would come from the ancient machinery of royal power. Camilla believed her future depended entirely on Charles. It did not. Behind the throne stood a network of constitutional advisors, household authorities, and senior royals responsible for protecting the continuity of the crown. Their concern was no longer whether Camilla had offended Catherine. Their concern was whether private influence had begun overriding the sovereign's official commands. By the time Charles entered the council chamber, the recommendation had already been written, reviewed, and placed beside an uncapped pen. Charles stopped at the table and read the first page without speaking. The Royal Council Review examined ceremonial titles, delegated household authority, access rights, and precedence. The formal order deciding who stands where and who carries greater rank at official events. Its purpose was simple but severe: to decide whether those privileges still protected the monarchy or had begun damaging it. William and Anne sat apart from the advisors, carrying influence but not absolute control. The prince mattered because he represented the next reign and already carried major duties beside Catherine. The Princess Royal mattered because decades of service had made her one of the institution's most trusted figures. Yet neither could remove Camilla's title alone. The final recommendation required the council's authority and the king's response. Charles reached the conclusion, removed his glasses, and looked toward his sister. His voice dropped when he admitted that approving the order would feel like publicly declaring his marriage a failure. The king had spent years defending the woman beside him. Now every signature threatened to turn that defense into humiliation. Anne did not soften the truth. According to the documented council record, she told her brother that protecting Camilla from shame could not require Catherine, frightened staff members, or the future monarchy to accept repeated interference. Her words were not cruel. That made them even harder to resist. William then opened the sealed appendix. An appendix was an attached section containing extra evidence and binding restrictions. The pages showed that Camilla's informal office channel had delayed several briefings intended for Catherine, allowing important information to arrive late or incomplete. The future king placed one delayed file before his father. He revealed through the recorded council statement that it concerned a major national ceremony, one where his wife had nearly entered completely unprepared before senior officials and foreign guests. Catherine's reputation had almost been damaged by a decision she never even knew had been made. Silence settled over the chamber. Charles understood that this was no longer about rivalry. It was about whether the crown's instructions could still be trusted once they left his desk. The council agreed to transfer the title, but the monarch asked for one final night. He wanted Camilla to surrender it voluntarily, preserve selected privileges, and avoid a compulsory order. That final night was meant to preserve her dignity, yet by morning, Camilla had made a choice that left the council no path back. Charles entered Camilla's rooms, carrying the only offer that could have spared her from formal removal. She could surrender the title voluntarily, retain selected ceremonial privileges, and allow the palace to describe the change as a graceful transition. But Camilla saw no dignity in surrender. She saw defeat. Before dawn, she rejected the proposal in writing. Hours later, the royal council converted its recommendation into an order, and the world she had built began disappearing around her. Charles placed the withdrawal statement before her and explained what remained possible. Camilla could keep a smaller public role, retain part of her personal staff, and leave the palace presenting a united front. A negotiated withdrawal meant she would step back by agreement rather than be removed by force. It was the last protection the king could offer without ignoring the council's findings. Camilla read every line while he waited. The queen consort understood that the offer preserved dignity in public, but not power in private. Accepting it meant admitting that the authority she had spent years building no longer belonged to her. She looked at her husband and asked whether he truly expected her to sign away the life he had once promised to defend. Charles did not answer quickly. He could no longer excuse the altered orders or the delayed briefings, yet he still wanted to shield her from open humiliation. The king told her the council would impose the complete transfer if she refused. That transfer, already detailed in the sealed appendix, would remove far more than a title. Staff, offices, access, and ceremonial duties would all pass away from her. Camilla waited until he left. Then she tore the unsigned statement in half and told her private secretary that accepting it would erase her entire life. According to the secretary's documented account, her voice remained steady even as her hands shook. She would not surrender willingly. Charles spent the night in another wing of the palace. He sat alone with the rejected offer beside him, devastated that his final attempt to protect her dignity had failed. The monarch had chosen duty, but the choice felt nothing like victory. Sunrise brought the punishment into motion. Camilla's staff received formal instructions that their reporting lines, offices, and ceremonial duties would transfer to Catherine's household by midday. One senior aide entered the council chamber, removed the embossed folder bearing Camilla's name, and replaced it with another marked for Catherine. Neither woman was there to witness the exchange. Yet that quiet act made the new order completely real. Camilla later recovered from her collapse and refused to speak with Charles. Instead, she asked for one thing: a private meeting with the woman who had inherited her title. For the first time since the crisis began, Camilla and Catherine would face each other without Charles, William, advisors, or the council standing between them. The palace expected anger when Camilla entered Catherine's private room. It expected accusations, demands, perhaps even a final attempt to reverse the council order. Instead, the two women sat opposite each other, with no aides present and no prepared language to protect them. Camilla looked exhausted. Catherine looked deeply unsettled. Between them lay the document that had stripped one woman of her authority and handed it to the other. Then Camilla asked a question Catherine had feared all morning. "Did you know?" Catherine had agreed to the meeting, despite William's warning that she might be pressured into rejecting the title. The prince had reminded his wife that the decision no longer belonged to either woman. The transferred position carried ceremonial precedence, meaning the formal order of rank at royal events, along with control over selected initiatives and household duties, once managed by Camilla. Refusing it could throw those responsibilities back into complete uncertainty. Catherine met her eyes and answered without hesitation. She had not known the council would act that morning, and she had never asked for Camilla's removal. The princess admitted that receiving the document had left her shaken, not triumphant. She understood what the title represented, but she also understood what losing it had cost the woman sitting across from her. Camilla listened, then finally lowered the defense she had carried through every confrontation. According to a recorded private account prepared after the meeting, the queen consort admitted that Catherine's popularity had frightened her. She had watched public trust gather around the younger woman and feared becoming invisible before Charles's reign had even fully settled. That fear had pushed her to alter instructions, delay briefings, and treat every rise in Catherine's standing as a personal threat. The silence between them changed. Catherine did not excuse what had happened, but she no longer saw only ambition. She saw insecurity that had hardened into control. Catherine then revealed that she had considered refusing the title. William had warned her during a private conversation that such a refusal would reopen the power struggle and weaken the council's authority. The future queen now understood that accepting the role was not about defeating Camilla. It was about ending the conflict before it damaged the monarchy any further. Camilla placed her hand on the transfer document and slowly pushed it across the table. She told Catherine not to make the same mistake she had made. Never confuse a royal position with personal security. A title could create access, respect, and influence, but it could never silence fear. Catherine accepted the document and promised her first public act would not be a celebration. It would acknowledge the pain, restraint, and human cost behind the transfer. When the palace gates opened and the announcement reached the public, Catherine's first appearance would determine whether the transfer looked like triumph, punishment, or something far more human. By afternoon, the decision had escaped the palace walls and seized the attention of the entire country. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Crowds gathered beside the gates of Buckingham Palace. Yet the image that defined the day was not Camilla's collapse or the council's sealed order. It was Catherine stepping from a car without a smile, wearing no celebratory jewels and carrying a handwritten statement. In that restrained moment, the public understood that the monarchy was witnessing a transfer of power, not a victory parade. The palace released a formal bulletin confirming that Camilla's title and ceremonial authority had transferred to Catherine with immediate effect. A formal bulletin was the Crown's official written announcement, designed to state the decision clearly without exposing every private detail behind it. The message confirmed the change, but it did not mention the altered directives, delayed briefings, or staff members who had feared challenging the Queen Consort's office. The country divided almost instantly. Some broadcasters described the decision as necessary discipline after authority had been misused. Others framed it as the public destruction of the king's wife. The silence around the evidence made the story even more explosive, because millions could see the punishment without fully understanding the reason behind it. Charles remained out of public view. He had already watched Camilla lose her title and collapse inside the chamber. Now the king heard commentators repeat that moment across every channel, turning his private failure into a national spectacle. According to a recorded account from his private secretary, he asked for the television to be switched off, then sat without speaking, as reports continued from the corridor outside. Catherine waited inside the car, while the noise beyond the gates grew louder. She turned to William and said she would not allow the public to believe she was enjoying another woman's humiliation. The princess removed a prominent ceremonial brooch before stepping out. The prince understood the gesture at once. She would accept the responsibility, but she would not display triumph. A newspaper seller lifted the evening edition outside Buckingham Palace. Across the front page, enormous letters declared, "The crown changes hands." Beneath them appeared a split image, Camilla leaving through a side entrance and Catherine approaching the main doors. That single page captured the entire day. One woman retreating from power as another moved toward it. Catherine unfolded her handwritten statement and honored Camilla's years of service before promising stability, duty, and respect. She did not mention victory. She did not celebrate the title. Inside the palace, Charles prepared to face his wife one final time. The country had seen the title change hands, but only Charles could decide what remained of the marriage, the trust, and the woman behind the fallen rank. When Charles finally entered Camilla's room, the council order had already taken full effect. Her ceremonial seal was gone. Her official folder had been removed. Catherine's name now occupied the position Camilla had spent years trying to secure. Yet the king did not come to discuss titles. He came to confront what remained after ambition, fear, and silence had stripped away every royal defense. Their final conversation would determine whether this moment ended only Camilla's authority or destroyed their personal bond as well. Charles sat opposite her and placed the hand bearing his wedding ring on the table. The gesture carried more weight than any official document between them. A ceremonial seal was the formal mark used to represent royal authority, and its removal meant Camilla could no longer act through the senior position she had once controlled. That loss was permanent. Still, the king had come as a husband before delivering his final judgment as sovereign. Camilla looked at him and waited. Charles told her he still loved her, but love could no longer protect decisions that had weakened his command. The monarch spoke without anger. That calm made the truth even more painful. He had defended her through years of public hostility. Yet he could not defend altered instructions, delayed briefings, or the fear created among palace staff. The queen consort finally stopped resisting. According to a documented account of the private conversation, she admitted that fear had driven her choices. Catherine's growing trust with the public had made her feel replaceable. William's rising authority had made the future seem closer than she was ready to accept. Even Charles's reduced duties had felt like a warning that the life she had fought so hard to secure was beginning to move beyond her. Charles listened without interrupting, but he did not reverse the decision. He told Camilla their marriage would continue, though her role inside the institution would change forever. She would withdraw from senior royal decision-making, lose control of the disputed household channels, and accept a quieter private position beside him. Catherine formally accepted the transferred title as a duty rather than a victory. The council also rebuilt its reporting lines so that no unofficial office could again override written instructions from the sovereign or the authorized future monarch. That change mattered, because the crown could survive personal conflict only if its commands remained clear and completely trusted. A handwritten note arrived for Camilla before evening. Catherine promised that the title would be used to stabilize the family. not erase the years of service that came before it. The message did not remove the pain, but it ended the struggle with dignity. Camilla lost the title she had once believed would secure her forever. Catherine accepted a burden she had never demanded. And Charles learned that preserving the crown sometimes means refusing to protect the person he loves from the consequences of her own choices. The palace did not celebrate. It simply moved forward, wounded, reordered, and certain at last about who would carry the monarchy into its next chapter. Thanks for watching Royal Zone. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to Royal Zone so you never miss an update. And we will see you in the next one.